In 31 years on this bench, I have learned to read a room before anyone speaks. I can tell the difference between someone who is guilty and frightened and someone who is guilty and comfortable. Frightened people hold their hands together. Comfortable people hold their chin up. The man who walked into my courtroom on a Tuesday morning in October held his chin up. He was wearing a gray suit, freshly pressed. He had the kind of posture you develop when you've spent years in a position that gave you authority over people who had no choice but to obey. He moved through the room like someone who still believed at some level that rooms like this one were not built for people like him. He was wrong. His name was Douglas Hale, 54 years old, 15 years as a licensed social services coordinator for the county's elderly assistance program. The man responsible for managing benefits, housing supplements, and medical reimbursements for over 200 vulnerable seniors in this district. The woman he had stolen from was named Eleanor Marsh. She was 83 years old. She was not in the courtroom. She was in a care facility across town, in a room she could no longer afford, being told by administrators that her account was 3 months behind. She sent a letter instead. I'll get to that. The charges were precise and they were serious. Embezzlement of public funds, abuse of public office, aggravated fraud against a protected class, specifically elderly individuals under state care coordination. The investigation had taken 14 months. It began when a junior caseworker named Priya Anand noticed a pattern during a routine audit, reimbursement checks processed, deposits confirmed on paper. But when she made follow-up calls to verify receipt, something the office did not require but that Priya did anyway, on her own time, 3 seniors reported they had never received the funds. She flagged it internally. Her supervisor dismissed it as clerical error. She flagged it again. She was told to focus on her caseload. She called the district attorney's office directly. I want that on record. Because without Priya Anand making that call, Douglas Hale would have retired with a commendation and a pension. And Eleanor Marsh would have spent the rest of her life not understanding why the money her late husband worked 40 years to supplement was simply not there. The investigation ultimately identified 31 cases, 31 elderly individuals whose reimbursements had been intercepted, redirected, or simply erased from the system with the confidence of a man who knew no one was watching closely enough. Total amount misappropriated, $219,000. The oldest victim was 87. The youngest was 69. The average age was 78. Douglas Hale had chosen carefully. He arrived with 2 attorneys, both experienced, both expensive, both carrying the organized comm of people who had been paid very well to find every possible angle. He did not look at the gallery when he entered. In the gallery sat 4 people connected to the case, a daughter of one victim, a son of another, Priya Anand, who had taken the day off work to be present, and a representative from the county's Elder Services office, a woman who had worked alongside Douglas Hale for 11 years and who sat with her hands flat on her knees and her face completely unreadable. Douglas Hale sat down, adjusted his jacket, and folded his hands on the table in front of him. He looked prepared, measured, in control. I have seen that look before. It is the look of someone who has decided that the best strategy is to appear to be the calmest person in the room, to project the image of a man wrongly entangled in a complicated situation he is confident the process will sort out. The process was about to sort it out. Just not the way he was imagining. His lead attorney opened with a framework I have heard many variations of over the years. The financial discrepancies were the result of a systemic failure in the county's outdated case management software. Mr. Hale had flagged these issues repeatedly over his 15 years of service. There was documentation. He had, in fact, requested a system upgrade 3 times. The county had declined each time due to budget constraints. The redirected funds were not stolen. They were caught in processing loops that Mr. Hale had been manually attempting to resolve. Some of the resolutions had been incorrectly coded, which created the appearance of irregularity. Mr. Hale had dedicated 15 years of his life to some of the most vulnerable people in this community. His record of service was exemplary. He had received commendations. He had mentored junior staff. The idea that this man had deliberately targeted the elderly people in his care was frankly inconsistent with everything his colleagues, his supervisors, and his community knew about him. I let the attorney finish. Then I asked one question. Counsel, the investigation identified 31 cases spanning 4 years. In how many of those cases did the processing error, as you've described it, result in funds being redirected toward Mr. Hale's personal accounts? The attorney paused for a fraction of a second too long. Your Honor, the nature of the misdirection. All 31, I said. The answer is all 31. The software malfunctioned on 31 separate occasions across 4 years in favor of the same personal account. I just want the record to reflect that we have established that. The attorney sat down. I gave him the opportunity to address the court directly. His attorneys had advised against it. I could see that in the brief exchange of looks before he stood anyway. He said he understood the severity of what was being alleged. He said he had spent 15 years genuinely caring about the people on his caseload. He said the investigation had uncovered errors he took full moral responsibility for, even if the circumstances were more complex than the charges suggested. He said he was sorry. I watched him say it. I have been in this room long enough to know what sorry sounds like when it means something. It is usually quieter. It is usually slower. It does not usually come packaged inside the word alleged. I let the silence sit after he finished. Then I picked up a piece of paper from the left side of my desk. Eleanor Marsh could not be present, but she had asked her granddaughter to help her write a letter to the court, and that letter had been submitted as part of the victim impact record. I read it aloud. My name is Eleanor Marsh. I am 83 years old. I live in the Cedarview Care Facility on Hollis Avenue, where I have been a resident for 2 years. I was a school teacher for 34 years. My husband, Ronald, was an electrician. We were not wealthy people, but we were careful people. Ronald passed 11 years ago and left me with a small supplement policy that was meant to cover the gap between my Social Security and what my care facility costs each month. Mr. Hale was assigned to my case 4 years ago. He was polite. He called me by my first name. He explained things clearly. He told me everything was being handled. For 2 years, I believed him. Then my granddaughter noticed that my account statements didn't match what I should have been receiving. She asked me questions I couldn't answer. She made calls I didn't know to make. I don't entirely understand everything that happened. What I understand is this. I trusted someone whose job was to protect me. And that person looked at me, at my file, at my age, at the fact that I live in a care facility and don't always understand the paperwork, and decided I was a safe choice. I want the court to know that I am not confused about what that means. I am old. I am not naive. He chose me because he thought I wouldn't notice, or because he thought that even if I noticed, I wouldn't know what to do. Ronald worked 40 years for that money. I would like the court to remember that when it decides what to do next. I set the letter down. The courtroom was completely still. I looked at Douglas Hale. For the first time since he had walked into the room, he was not holding his chin up. Douglas Hale was found guilty on all counts. I want to be precise about the sentence because each element was chosen with intention. First, 7 years in state prison with eligibility for parole review after 5, contingent on full financial restitution being documented and confirmed. Second, full restitution of $219,000 to the 31 identified victims or their estates, if any had passed, distributed in order of financial need as assessed by an independent officer of the court. Third, permanent revocation of his license to serve in any public-facing social services, elder care, disability coordination, or benefits management role in this state or any other. Fourth, formal commendation entered into the court record for Priya Anand, junior caseworker, whose voluntary follow-up calls and whose willingness to escalate past a supervisor who told her to stop were the sole reason this case existed at all. Douglas Hale's attorney immediately moved to argue the sentence down. Standard language, mitigating factors, first offense, years of service. I said, counsel, your client spent 15 years building the exact professional reputation that made him trusted enough to do this. His years of service are not a mitigating factor. They are the method. The attorney had nothing to add to that. After the hearing, Priya Anand stopped in the hallway outside the courtroom. She was not looking for recognition. She looked honestly like someone who had been carrying something heavy for 14 months and was still deciding whether it was safe to put it down. I stopped and told her what I had said on the record, that her name was in it, that what she had done was documented, that it would not be erased. She nodded. Then she said something I haven't forgotten. She said, I kept thinking about what would have happened to them if I hadn't called. Not the money, just nobody would have ever known it wasn't their fault. They would have spent years thinking they miscounted, or forgot, or that they were losing their minds. She said it quietly, the way people say things that have been sitting in them for a long time. I thought about Eleanor Marsh, 83 years old, in a facility on Hollis Avenue, wondering for 2 years why the numbers didn't add up, wondering if she was confused, wondering if Ronald's policy had somehow been less than she remembered. Douglas Hale had not just taken their money, he had taken their certainty, their ability to trust their own memory, their sense that the world was still making sense. That is a particular kind of cruelty. It does not leave a visible mark. It settles quietly into a person and makes them smaller without them knowing why. There are people who steal from strangers and call it desperation. There are people who steal from institutions and call it the system's fault. And then there are people who spend 15 years being trusted by the most vulnerable people in a community, people who cannot easily advocate for themselves, who depend entirely on the integrity of the person assigned to them, and who look at that trust and see an opportunity. Douglas Hale was not desperate. He had a salary, he had a pension, he had a professional reputation that would have carried him comfortably to retirement. He was not careless. 31 cases over 4 years is not carelessness. That is calculation. What he was, and what I think he understood standing in that courtroom, was caught, not by the system that employed him, not by the supervisors who dismissed the first flag, not by the audits that missed it for 4 years, by a junior caseworker who made follow-up calls nobody required her to make on her own time because she thought the people on the other end of the phone deserved someone to check. That is also something I want on the record. Justice in this case did not come from the institution. It came from one person inside it who decided that what she was seeing was wrong and refused to stop saying so. Eleanor Marsh's letter said he chose me because he thought I wouldn't notice. He was wrong about that too. She noticed. She just needed someone to believe her. The sentence was the correct sentence. And Ronald's 40 years, every last cent of it is going home.